Hi guys, what's up? My name is David and welcome back to my channel. If you're new to this channel, hi, I'm a trans guy from Poland, currently living in the Netherlands, and I talk about trans stuff, queer stuff, and Viking stuff because that's my area of interests. So, since my top 10, I guess, video did very well recently, you can go watch it if you want, I decided to make another one. And this time I want to talk about 10 misconceptions that exist about trans people. So these are not just things that cis people think about trans people, but sometimes trans people themselves have perhaps not fully right ideas about what being trans is. And of course there is no right way to be trans, but there is a general idea what being trans means to different people. So yeah, shall we just get on with it? Number one is you do not need to hate yourself in order to feel like your transness is valid enough. Not everyone experiences dysphoria in the same way, so some people might be okay with their body but still feel like it doesn't match the gender they feel like. So if you're questioning your transness because you feel like you feel good about yourself, then don't worry, because you really do not have to hate yourself to be trans. And the whole point of transitioning is to alleviate dysphoria. So, like, I absolutely don't hate myself. And that doesn't make me less trans, it just means that I did what's right for me. So, yeah. Number two is transitioning does not mean changing your gender. The whole phrase of changing your gender is slightly weird because that's not what being trans is. Because gender is not the same as sex. Sex is a very complex idea of biological features that you are either born with or develop later in life, whereas gender is what role in society you have, what you feel like. There are different definitions of sex, there are different definitions of gender. But that being said, usually when someone transitions, as in actively doing things to align with the gender that they identify with, it means they were already trans. Being trans does not start when you transition, or even when you come out. It starts at the moment you realize that you do not identify with the sex you were assigned at birth. So therefore, transitioning is not changing your gender, it is aligning your body, how you're seen, to the gender that you already are. And that leads us to number three. Not everyone experiences gender dysphoria in the same way. Now, there are some people who say you don't have to have dysphoria to be trans. However, this is a criterion. If you want to medically transition, you have to have a diagnosis of gender dysphoria. And I guess people maybe don't realize they have dysphoria and think they're not, but still are trans. But maybe they don't realize that dysphoria can show itself in different ways. Different people have different issues with different body parts, or no issues with their body at all. They just want to socially transition and not medically. Sometimes dysphoria comes in waves. It's horrible one day and almost gone the other. And like I said in number one, you don't have to hate yourself. Dysphoria doesn't have to mean hating yourself. It just is discomfort in the features of your body that do not align with the gender you identify with. Like, for example, some people might not want bottom surgery because they are completely fine with the genitals they have, but they do want top surgery because they do not want to have breasts, or they do want to have breasts if they're male to female. So yeah, dysphoria just shows itself in different ways, and maybe some people don't realize they have dysphoria. That's why they think that it's not necessary to be trans. But that's just my personal opinion. Feel free to comment on that. Number four, which has a lot to do with number three, is that not everyone has the same transition goals. There's no set beginning and set end when it comes to transitioning. Some people do not even want to medically transition. They do not want to take hormones or have surgeries. They just want to be perceived as another gender, which, well, if they feel comfortable enough in their body to not want to do that, or if they do not have the means to transition, or they think it has too many risks, some people decide not to do it, and that's perfectly fine. Same goes with how long you take hormones, for example. For some, it's gonna be a lifelong thing. I personally think I'm gonna be taking hormones for the rest of my life. But some people get the effects they want and then decide to stop. And then some effects are irreversible, like facial hair, a deeper voice. And for some people, that's the changes they want, and then their body changes back to the previous state. But they could still be happy with your results. And same goes for surgeries. Some people decide to get everything possible done, like there's not one sex change surgery. There are multiple procedures that could be done. For example, top surgery for trans men, that is the removal of breast tissue. For trans women, it's a breast enlargement. There's bottom surgery, which there are different ways of creating or removing a penis. There are facial feminization and facial masculinization surgeries, and there are also voice surgeries for trans women. But yeah, not everyone needs and wants all these surgeries. I personally had top surgery, but for now I'm not planning to get bottom surgery. Not because I don't want to dig, but because I'm not fully sure about the results I've seen before on the internet, and I want to wait a little bit to see if techniques improve and I would be able to get a nicer dick, basically. Number 5 actually has a lot to do with what I just said, is being trans does not mean you can ask us anything you want. Now, I personally am fine with sharing my personal information on the internet because I don't see this as something I should keep quiet about or be ashamed of. It's just who I am, and if it's gonna help other people in their journey, then I'm willing to do everything I can to help them. But still, not everyone is comfortable enough to talk to people about these very personal stuff, like their body, their genitals. But some people tend to think that just because someone tells them they're trans, they can immediately ask, oh, have you had the surgery, or what's in your pants? That's not how it works, and you probably wouldn't ask your cisgender friends what's in their pants, so why would you do that to a trans person? But yeah, there's always people that can answer your questions, and there's also this beautiful thing called the internet. If you really want to know something but you're too scared to ask anyone, you can always just Google it. You will be surprised what you find. Now, number 6 is a argument that a lot of transphobes use, and it's that no one is forcing us to transition. And especially no one is forcing people to medically transition, and definitely not young children. So this argument is used by people who say that the woke leftists are forcing their children to be trans and to transition and to take hormones and all that. Now, this is most definitely not the case. I would say it's quite often the opposite. People are basically forcing us or begging us not to transition because they think that's the wrong thing to do. And before you get to a point where you're able to medically actually change things about your body, you'd have to have at least a few years of therapy, at least a few medical professionals making sure that you are sure about your choice. At least here in the Netherlands, you have to sign informed consent forms, meaning that you know what the effects and potential side effects of transitioning are. So everything you do is your decision, your informed decision, and no one is forcing you to do it. And if they are, that's not good. They should stop. Number 7 is a language thing. You'll probably hear people say a transgender or transgendered when referring to trans people. Now, this is grammatically incorrect because transgender is an adjective. So I am a transgender person, not a transgender. And it's also not an action, so I'm not transgendered. With terms that are usually used are trans person, transgender person. Some people still use the term transsexual, although not everyone is as positive about that one. I personally would say that technically I am transsexual because I have medically changed my body into looking more like the opposite sex. But yeah, whatever labels you want to use for yourself are valid. Just know that things like a transgender and transgendered are just wrong. Number 8 is that people can realize they're trans at any age. Now, this is also something that transphobes like to use as a counter argument, especially against people who came out later in life. They're like, oh, but why didn't you know as a child? Or oh, but you were such a feminine little girl as a child. What made you want to be a man? Or something like that. And the thing is, not everyone is as invested in their gender as a child. Some children very quickly have an understanding of themselves and their gender, and for example can very quickly say like, oh, I am a boy or I am a girl. But for example, me personally, I just didn't really care about gender or like sex or things like that until I reached puberty, because that's when things started changing in my body that I didn't want. So before that I was just busy doing other stuff. And there's people who come out at like 20, 30, 40. There's no age limit. People make realizations about themselves all the time, and you're not better just because you came out earlier, or worse because you came out later. It's all perfectly fine. Number 9 is something that even people in the LGBTQ community have a hard time understanding sometimes, and that there is more than male to female and female to male, because some people, even trans people, have the idea that there are only two genders and you can go either from the one to the other or the other way around. However, some non-binary people also choose to identify with the term trans. Not every, but some of them. Because if you weren't assigned non-binary at birth, then if you go from one gender to non-binary, it's still a different one. So that would mean you're trans too. And some people realize later in life that they're actually non-binary when they've already transitioned from one gender to the other. And that leads me to number 10, and it's that detransitioning is not always caused by regret. Of course, there are some people that regret the decisions they have had made about transitioning, which is perfectly valid. And as long as they don't attack other trans people saying they should detransition too, their feelings are absolutely valid. However, there's a big part of detransitioning people who feel a different way, and a big part of those are people who come out as non-binary, and this is seen as detransitioning because they transition to like one gender and then realize they're not actually that gender but non-binary. And yeah, that doesn't mean they're not trans anymore, but it's still seen as detransitioning sometimes. And actually in most cases, people detransition because of social stigma or lack of resources. Or people are so against them being trans that they just cannot handle transitioning anymore and decide to go back into the closet. Which is not something I would wish to anyone, but it's still what happens sometimes. Well, that was all the 10 things I had for today. I hope you enjoyed this video. Feel free to share your thoughts about this, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.